you guys really watch. I watch France Australia as a one of that. I wonder if that's intentional, scheduling from the point of view, like, you know, getting some of the decent games, although some of those like kickoffs are perfect for European and even
You mean why that's been the big game?
yeah, and it's just happened to work out well for us.
Yeah.
So with Derek and Andy, for about 20 minutes now. So
I can't go any
Okay, thanks everyone for coming. Appreciate your patience today with obviously all the news Friday, but it's been a big day to sort of get sorted. So obviously New Zealand Football CEO Andy Marston, New Zealand Football President Derek Shaw. Derek, do you want to open up with a statement of what's been going on in the recent environment?
Yeah, thanks, Pete. Kia ora, everybody. Thanks very much for attending this afternoon. And you're all aware that player welfare is a critical issue for New Zealand football. It's something that we take very, very seriously. The nature of the allegations that have been received by New Zealand football earlier this week have been discussed by New Zealand Football Executive Committee. Obviously, we've received those letters outlining a number of concerns, and we take those very, very seriously. Last night, the board met, had a teleconference, and considered options around working through the matters, and we've resolved to conduct an independent review of the Football Ferns environment, and part of that process obviously has been working very, very closely with the PFA through this process, and again keeping that the welfare of the players really central to their considerations. So the terms of reference for that will be developed independently by the reviewer, and that's quite critical if you like to keep the review independent, and that will also they will also be reviewed by the PFA and then signed off by EXCO as well as part of that process. The coach, Andreas, is on special leave while the review has been undertaken, and pending the outcomes of that, there will be employment processes around that. So obviously we're very, very committed to resolve this situation, and the review is a really critical part of that process. Thank you.
Any questions from the floor?
Derek, with everything that's gone on and having read the contents of those letters, is Andreas' position tenable?
I think one of the things around this process is there's a process of natural justice for all the parties involved, and the review will determine that. I think it's important that we let the review run its course, and the employment process will follow that.
Andy, what was your reaction to the contents of the letters received from the players?
Very disappointed to get so many comments through, and reading them all, it's really sad to see those sort of comments coming from anybody but any of our employees. So we've got to take it very seriously. We've got to make sure we put a proper process in place to protect everybody, as Derek says, the coach as well, and we make sure that we get to a right conclusion and understand just what's been going on.
Last week you said that you weren't aware of any issues between the players and the coach. Were you surprised to read what you read in those letters, and how does it reflect on you that you weren't aware of any issues?
Look, right up until probably the week or 2 weeks before the last activity, the Japan game, we were getting endorsements about the change programme, what was going on from players, from a whole range of people, some in the public domain that you'll have seen. So going into that camp, we knew we were making changes. We knew Andreas was making changes that we'd asked him to make. And this was very much about performance and making sure we drive our performance up. Because let's be clear, the last two Pinnacle events, as I said last week, we did not perform. So changes were needed. So we knew there was change management going on, and there were some people on board and some people not. But the extent of what's come through from the letters, there was no indication of that at all. And as I said last week, as soon as we get facts, and look, the process has worked. The reason why the union is there is for our employees to be able to have a say. And that's worked, and it's come through, and we've responded quickly.
It's been widely reported that you personally received correspondence from a now former member of staff, the manager of the Football Ferns, after the series against Scotland in March, and that you failed to act on that. What's your response to that?
So there's been comment about a tour report post-March. We get a tour report after every activity, so the technical team will produce that, we'll review it. So in that technical report, there was no mention at all about the need for a review. There was concerns about job clarity, job roles, changes, all those sort of things, and that was reviewed in the normal course. So there was no mention in that report at all around the need for a review. Subsequently, through the member of staff's exit review, there was a mention in that exit interview of uncomfortable with the culture that was happening on tour. But that was wrapped up in a sort of a performance management issue around the individual. So difficult to comment further on that one, but there was certainly no sign that this was coming.
Do you think her version of events would match yours?
I hope so. There's nothing that we would hide. The process is very clear. The emails are very clear. There's correspondence between me and the individual, thanking her for her service to the business. She'd been a great stalwart to the business, but she was concerned.
So there was nothing in her report that gave you any indication of what was to come from the
So just to be clear, the report comes from the technical director, okay, which is a compilation of all of his team's inputs. So that report that I had nothing from the individual we're talking about an issue in the camp.
So it came from Andreas?
Correct.
So he was the one who received the report from the team manager?
So what would happen normally on any activity with any coach is they would gather information from all of the component parts on tour. Strength and conditioning, the medical team, the technical team, the logistics team, and that would all be compiled into an overall report. And that was the report that we received.
Does this highlight a conflict of interest for Andreas in his role as the football commissioner?
I mean, Gareth would have been involved in compiling that report, so I'm not sure that's the issue here, but I think there certainly wasn't anything in that report. There was very much clarity about the changes that were being put through the programme.
On the face of it, it looks like a conflict of interest, doesn't it?
That's your interpretation.
I think a lot of people
Okay, that's fine.
Derek, do you think that your board has been adequately kept abreast of developments over the last few months, including what Andy's talking about?
Well, the matters have escalated in the last few days, and the board has worked very, very quickly around that. And I've certainly, we've received 2 lots of communications and met, reviewed those, worked, closely through those with the PFA in terms of getting agreed statements, agreed processes from that. So it's, I can't make any comment beyond the information that we've had at hand at this point.
And the process of Andreas also being appointed Football Ferns coach, will that be investigated in the review?
I think the whole environment's going to be picked up in the review, absolutely.
So that choice of having him as both the head coach and technical director, under the FIFA guidelines it says that that's incompatible. Were you guys aware of that?
As we said at the time, we were absolutely aware. That's a guideline, and what we looked at the time in terms of recruitment was what was available, what we could afford with the budget that we had, and what was the best solution. And as we said at the time, we believed Gareth getting through to a pro licence was the right solution. But in that interim period, Andreas was going to take it for a short term whilst Gareth get qualified. So that was endorsed by the recruitment process. It was endorsed through the board, and we were comfortable with that decision.
So in the meantime, while Andreas is on leave, who will be taking over?
We need to review that once the dust settles in the next few days.
And the NZ stuff approached NZ Football with complaints from the player on the record, and NZ Football's reaction was to silence that player, whether directly or by reminding her of some of a possibility of a fine. Shouldn't that have raised alarm bells that prompted proactive investigation by NZ Football?
Look, any time we've had concerns, we've dealt with them and we've looked into them. So there's been isolated incidents prior to this point. We've now got something that's factual from a group of players that we've taken very seriously.
Derek, as part of this review, will you be revisiting the appointment process?
I think we'll certainly look at the outcomes from the review process, and if there are systemic issues we need to look at relative to those processes, they would certainly be considered by the board.
So do you concede that the decision to appoint Andreas to this role while he was the technical director may have been the wrong one? We've got to let the review run its course, and I think it's important that we don't prejudge the outcomes from that. I think there's some things that we need to look at by way of process now. So there's a freer flow of information on a more regular basis. I think that when you look at some of the things that have happened in other sports, just sort of more recently, around cycling, netball, and so forth, it's quite clear that there's sort of, a need for what I'd call a more systemic sort of check-in on player welfare, and that's something much beyond the Fern situation now. It relates to all of the players within our care, and I think that relates to all sort of elite, athletes and team environments.
Andy, that report you received in March from the tour, did that allude to anything at all to do with player welfare?
No,
Who wrote it?
No. It talked about the big issue that's been going on over the last 2 tours was around role clarity and responsibilities, and that was very much around the change of coach, different expectations, and what he thought certain people should be doing. And that was a consistent theme throughout, and that had been mentioned by players, it had been mentioned by staff. So that was not untoward at that time because we were putting changes in place to affect performance.
Okay. So the fact that so many players are disheartened and dissatisfied with the current arrangement, would it be fair to say, therefore, you guys would be blindsided by this news?
This was a shock, absolutely. I think whilst there's been 13 letters in through the PFA criticising the environment, there has been other letters of support directly to the coach, to ourselves, from other players. So that's why it's really important that we have an independent review to get to the bottom of just what has happened and what we can do to improve that environment.
You said 13 letters of complaint, how many letters of support?
I don't know, there's been probably half a dozen letters of support coming either to the coach directly or to us.
From players?
From players, yeah.
Andy, is there any regrets on your behalf of how this has been handled, this whole process?
In terms of?
In terms of since there were concerns that you were aware of.
Look, there is always speculation and there's always opinion in football. We've been here so many times before. We always have a lot of opinion. We've got to deal with fact. And I think the important thing when we spoke last week was we knew we had a good system. If there was a process breakdown, if there was a player concern, they've got a union to be able to go to raise those issues. So on the one hand, I'm pleased that the system has worked. You know, the players have been very courageous to speak out, to go to the union, and that's been brought to us. And we've reacted very, very quickly and we'll deal with it properly.
Andy, when was the first time, just to be clear, that you realised that players or people involved in New Zealand football were not happy with Andreas's conduct?
Well, ultimately, when this letter came in, this was the first formal confirmation that there were issues. Now, before that, there's obviously been one or two players who've spoken out, and there's been a high-profile player who resigned and then came back into the camp and then resigned again. So there's been isolated issues, but collectively, this has been what's come in and caused the action.
So why has it taken a staff member to resign, a former captain to speak out, and the likes of us going to report on this? Why has it taken so long for New Zealand football to address this?
I would disagree. It hasn't taken so long. Once we had the letter from the PFA with factual letters of evidence from players, we've reacted very quickly. We're in the same week. So there was no reason from anything else we had that was hard evidence, concrete or sufficient for us to believe that it was anything other than a change programme that was being put through that happens in teams all around the world, where we're looking to drive standards to get performance from a level that was not where we wanted to a level that we need to get to.
So the comments of the former captain amongst that player wasn't enough for you guys to look a little bit deeper?
We looked in at that point, but at that point we felt that there was a disagreement in terms of the style of play, the way they wanted to operate, and so that was always going to happen. There was a lot of people involved in the old regime who perhaps didn't support the new change programme, and that's a natural thing.
So Derek, does the board, does Andy have the backing of the board?
Yeah, Andy retains the confidence of the board.
100% after everything that has happened?
Yeah, I mean, we've also, again, I'd make the comment around we've got a review process, an independent reviewer. We need to look at the outcomes that come from that, and I think that relates to everybody. And we need to look at how how we've worked, the processes that are there, whether there's ways in which these things can be escalated early if there are concerns there, and they can come into a management and ultimately into a governance environment.
Andy, do you accept that it's hard to swallow for a lot of the football public that you guys weren't aware of any of these things before you say you would?
Look, it's difficult to comment on so much speculation and so much opinion. As we know, we get that all the time. Right now, what we're saying is we've got a very strong control process. We've worked on this for 4 years, and it was only a few weeks ago we were talking at the AGM with some of you about how good last year had been, how strong the game is in now financially and growth. The control matters were really in good shape, so this is really disappointing that this comes out so quickly thereafter. But the process has worked and people are responding quickly.
And Andreas' reaction to the complaints that have come in, what was that?
Oh look, Andreas is devastated. He was in I think there was a huddle on the pitch after the game, which I understand was quite emotional from everybody I've spoken to on the field in Wellington. So they've been taken aback the coaching team have been taken aback by what has come out as well. And so, he's absolutely devastated.
Were the players in the PFA aware of your decision, what you were doing with the investigation before this announcement today?
We've had the media release signed off by the PFA today.
And just going back to March, whether it's semantics of the tour report or what it was, we do understand there were allegations made completely the same as the ones the players have made to you in an interview. So why are you saying now you didn't get those? Why did you ignore?
So there was allegations made to me in an interview. Just explain what that was.
We know that what the tour manager has said,
Right.
of similar, the allegations of a similar nature
Yeah.
to what the players have said. So how can you say now that it all came as a surprise to you on Monday night?
Well, I've said already, Michael, that I wasn't aware of the extent of the issues as we are now. What we had was a member of staff who was being asked to do different things to what they wanted to do, and that was being managed through performance management, and that person resigned when they came back from the Spanish trip. As I said, I hadn't seen a tour report, so you've reported a tour report. I haven't seen a tour report from the individual. I've seen the letter of resignation, which was dealt with by her manager and by our HR team. I'd responded later on to thank her for her service because she'd been a very, very good performer over time. And then I saw latterly an exit interview, which is standard practice when someone leaves the business, and there was a final comment in there which was about we need to look at the culture in the Ferns environment. So that's all we'd had up to that point from one individual. And we discussed that and we looked at that, and when I looked at the tour report was consistent in that there were issues around job roles and responsibilities. People believed their jobs were different to what the coaches wanted. A lot of that was around change and expectation management from the coaching team, and so we had no reason to believe there was anything systemic or bigger. We've received this letter from the PFA with 13 letters of complaint, and we've reacted straight away.
Would Andreas have known about the issues that Claire raised?
I don't know. I don't know.
He didn't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, his pit tour report came into us, and we've dealt with it. We've reviewed that as it came through.
Derek, will the review cover off whether New Zealand football has failed to act on any concerns like the version of events being put forward by Andy versus the former member of staff? Will they be clarified?
It'll certainly consider all the information that's available, including interviewing all the people involved as part of that, and I guess, you know, what will come out relative to the evidence will be obviously quite important for everybody around this, and I think that's something that you know, from a process perspective, we need to get a real sense of that, and whether there's some deficiencies in our systems and processes that we need to make some changes around.
Andy, can you please explain why the New Zealand Football Association, Professional Footballers Association, have warned you away from talking to current football firms, either you or your staff members, or Andreas?
Yeah, that was in the letter this week, and again, it was quite disappointing to see that. But I think what we've got with the players is that some of our staff know them personally. So I was out of the country. I wasn't aware of this until the letter came in. But I think there's perhaps been a case of some of the members of staff being too close to some of the players. And so, absolutely rightly, that the PFA asked us to make sure staff were not contacting the players for whatever reason. I just think they know the players personally, and I think when you've got a working relationship and a personal relationship, you've got to be very careful.
Have you contacted any players yourself personally?
So the only player I've reached out to is the captain, which is what I've done regularly on a regular basis. And that's a usual practice. I would swap emails with the captain on a regular basis.
Have you or your staff insinuated to the players that it's in their best interest not to put forward formal complaints?
Well, I certainly haven't, and I would hope none of my staff have either.
Any chance Andreas has done that?
I'd be very surprised if Andreas has been in contact with staff since this has risen. We'd asked him not to make contact with the players or the staff.
Do you think the Football Association has now a distrust of its relationship with you?
The Football Association being what, the PFA?
Yes.
I have no idea. You need to ask them. You know, I think what you look at is what we've done over the last 4 years for the players. You know, I mean, it wasn't too long ago we were putting together the first single collective bargaining agreement that gave equal rights, and everyone was lauding how good that was for the players. So now let's lose sight of the fact that that was a fabulous step forward for all of our players. I think we've made great progress with the activity levels for the teams. You know, both teams have been performing well, and they've had lots of games, which is not something they've had in the past. So I think there's an awful lot of good out there as well. I take it this is really poor and this is difficult, and we've got to deal with it. But you know, there has been a lot of good things going on for the players over the past 4 years.
Does this affect the All Whites at all, given the fact that the All Whites head coach was appointed by Andre?
This shouldn't affect the All Whites at all. Fritz is putting a change program in place just the same as what Andreas is trying to affect. And you saw the results of that in India, where they had 2 very good results, and the reaction so far from the players is positive. So, you know, both coaches were trying to do the same thing, which is drive improved performance.
Andy, would you have been putting a change program in place if Tony hadn't resigned?
Yes, because we failed at our last 2 Pinnacle events.
Was the plan to put a change program in place one reason why he resigned?
That's for Tony to comment on, isn't it?
Last week you said you and Andreas had supported Ellie from the last time you talked to her. Do you and Andreas still have his support?
I haven't spoken to her since this came in. I think it's wrong for me to do that. The union has contacted us and asked us to deal with them, and we'll do that absolutely.
Could you have been more proactive in trying to find out information over the past 6 weeks?
Look, hindsight's a wonderful thing, but my judgment over that period of time, I believe, was right in that we were looking at changes, we were looking at people who were uncomfortable with change, and some people were very comfortable with change. And you know, until we got the collective message very firmly through that was factual, we've not been able to react. Now we've done something positive.
When you say change program in the firm's context, what do you mean by that?
Ultimately, we hired a coach to drive us to new levels of performance so that we could get out of our group at a Pinnacle event.
What was being changed in the team?
Well, I mean, the whole environment was being changed. The tactical, the technical, the professionalism, the approach, the whole range of things. This was very similar to when we changed the program 4 years ago with Anthony coming on board with the Always.
So Andy, just so we're clear, are you telling us that for the best part of 18 to 20 players have said they will no longer play for the Sky as long as he's coach?
13 of the players.
But you received, was it 5 or 6 letters of support?
There's been 5 or 6 letters of support from players saying, you know, congratulating or thanking or whatever it was for last week. Good time last week. Those type of comments. But the letters that have come in officially through the PFA have absolutely implied that they don't want to play for the Ferns under Andreas' leadership.
So Andy, do you see that relationship being able to be repaired?
The relationship.
If you've got so many players saying they're not going to play under him, do you feel like, do you have confidence that that relationship will be able to?
Look, I think that's why we've put this independent review in place. We have to get to the bottom of what's been going on, and we have to look at the facts. So it's wrong to try and prejudge anything right now. Let's get the review done, and let's have a look and see what that comes through.
As a CEO, if some of your 13 of your employees came and said that, what would you think?
Well, these are employees of ours, so as I said, devastated this has happened, and we've got to act with player welfare at the heart of what we do now.
Will you tell us who the investigator is when you appoint him?
Yes.
And will you tell us the terms of reference?
That's probably, yeah.
I don't think there's any issue with that. We've agreed that we'll work those through with, because as I said, it's important that the independent investigator actually can set those, because it's an experienced company and people involved in that, and it's good that they have the independence around that process. And secondly, the PFA will be part of that, so we want them to sign those off as well. And then our board needs to have a look at it to make sure that, you know, it covers all the aspects we think it should cover. And I think it would be a public document. There's no issue around that. Obviously, there are really, really important processes that need to be followed as part of that, though. That you know, that you have to respect the reviewer as part of what they do and how they do it.
In terms of timeframes, first for appointing someone and getting terms of reference, then for having this process come to a conclusion or some recommendations, what sort of timeframes are you hoping for?
We'd need to talk to the reviewer about that, but we're actually a little bit down the path relative to who that reviewer could be. So we're already working through that now, checking their availability and credentials and things. It is important that they've got the credible background, they've got the experience in doing this sort of work, and they can work independently as appropriately around it, and come back, I think, with some clarity of the issues that have emerged and some of the things that we need to look at as part of that process.
Andy, you've got a national under-20 team heading off to a World Cup in 5 or 6 weeks. I believe the squad's being announced next week or being named next week. There's players there that have been in the Ferns environment, there's staff there that have been in the Ferns environment. In terms of making sure they have the room and the backing to go on their World Cup campaign, you feel that this investigation and so on won't have an impact on that?
Look, it's a good question. That's what we've got to work through right now. So as soon as we've got, through the first couple of days of this, then we need to get into the operational stuff and make sure that the business continues. And if that means that some of the leadership team need to step into gaps and make sure that we support everybody, that's exactly what we'll do. The great thing is we've got a very good team of people who are passionate about football and want to do the right thing to make sure that the show goes on.
And aside from all the food stuff, there was quite a lot of negative comments and feedback about Andreas from the football community, areas of the football community. So did that not ring alarm bells for you about him when you're seeing all these other rumours and comments from prospective former players, etc.? Did that not ring some alarm bells for you?
Look, there's a lot of people who are not named, who have made sort of comments. Some have been named, but I've also had a lot of support in the coaching community, in the federation community, for the changes he's trying to put in place as well. So, it's a very difficult one here. That there's some people are going to agree with what's needed, and some people aren't. What we know is we've got somebody who, at face value, is highly qualified and has a good track record in doing what we asked him to come in to do, which was focusing on the youth, the academy space, which is what he'd done very well before. And look, anybody coming in to make those sort of changes, there's going to be reaction, and that's what we've seen. So let's not forget, the strategy that he brought to us and the strategy that he put to us in December was signed off by the board. The change programme that was needed was signed off collectively by all of us in December. Now, whether or not execution has been done in a way that is not acceptable, that's what the review needs to look at. But ultimately, the direction that we had was something that we all signed off. And why? It's because we want to deliver what we said in our strategy, was to achieve, success at pinnacle events. And we missed the World Cup in the men's very closely, but we missed that, and it's something we want to change. And we lost 50% of our funding from high performance sport because we did not get out of our group at the last two pinnacle events for the Ferns. So I'm sure you'd be the first to be here talking to us if we didn't do anything about it. We're looking for change, and what we've got to determine is whether that change was too rapid, too aggressive, too quick, whatever has caused this reaction.
We've got someone here that's facing serious allegations, who has been given unprecedented power within New Zealand football, executive director, and he's also played a huge role in the All Whites process, which people have concerns over. So this adds up to a massively, just an incredible.
Again, it's easy to say people have concerns over the All Whites coach hire. I mean, Fritz has been hired. But he's also individually, he's stacked up and he's been hired on his merits. He went through a full comprehensive recruitment programme. He was in the final three and was the best candidate. And the process that we had, the people involved in the process. And so far we've got good results, and I guess proof will be in the pudding in terms of how he performs. The All Whites seem to be pretty happy with how the India trip went. The feedback's been good, and they got two very good results. So I think I don't see any problems with what Fritz is doing right now.
And given how deep this review is going to go, are you comfortable with your position within this organisation?
Yeah, look, I think it's an obvious question, but let's look at this is an isolated incident over a 4-year period where we've performed very, very well. I think, go and read the 2017 review. I think I was sat with one of you talking about it a few weeks ago. We had a very strong 2017. I'm happy to stand on those results and show that football's in a good shape. I think the last incident we had, the big one around eligibility, was something we had to deal with. We had to clean up. It was a 10-year problem that we happened to stumble across, and we dealt with it well. I think the business is in good shape, record numbers of growth, record numbers of coaches, good financial position. So I'm not worried about how we're performing. I'm just really worried now about our players and that we get this right.
And when do we start seeing more Kiwi coaches in Kiwi roles?
When they're qualified and when they've come through the programme. So, remember 4 years ago we had no coach development programme, okay? I think we said in the annual report, right now we've got something like 4,000 or 5,000 people going through formal qualifications in this country to be coaches. So it's like any sport, any job. They need to be qualified and they need to have the experience. And what we're trying to do is help people to get qualified. That's the first step, once they've got the professional qualification. But then they're going to have to go into good environments to understand what coaching in a good environment looks like. And what we'd love to have, what we desperately want, is to be in a position where we've got top pro licensed coaches with experience who can take the All Whites, can take the Ferns, can take the technical director job. But right now that we have not got those options.
By good environments, you mean overseas, you've said that to people in coaching courses?
I've stood up in front of A-licensed courses and said to people, it's great to get the badge, it's fantastic. But if you're only coaching in an amateur league, how can you possibly then go into professional environments or international environments? And that stacks up in any business.
Andreas has the pro licence. Is he the model of the kind of coach that you want?
Andreas has got the pro licence in both the senior game and the youth game, which is quite unusual. So we've got to remember it's not just about the academics. That's got to be part of the equation. You've then got to look at the experience. And his experience going through the recruitment process was very strong for what we needed. So look, we've got to get this review through and see why this hasn't worked.
You could go down as the worst coach the Ferns have ever had. You could. Does that mean that New Zealand football's obsession with the pro licence will discontinue? Is that the mistake?
Look, I would just look at world football. You know, I think at world football, pro licenses for international games is not unusual. You know, you want the top coaches coaching at the very top of the game. So I think I stand by that, and it's consistent around the world, and we're striving to improve what we deliver. So I'm not sure that's the issue here.
The Economist had a really good article this week about success at World Cups, and you know what are the characteristics of teams that succeed, and one of them was best coach for the team. The second one was the ability to sort of play, you know, quite creative sort of football as well as having the structure there. And that's why certain teams often get through to those environments. And you know, the public of New Zealand, I think, have an expectation of New Zealand elite teams doing well on the world stage, and that's something that New Zealand football is committed to. And we saw, I think, that post the reaction to the Ferns game in Wellington. You know, when we go out on the park, no matter what game it is, we expect to win, and that's a fair expectation. And that's something that the board and New Zealand football is committed to.
Did Andreas' comments after the game in Wellington bring the game into disrepute?
No, I think I wasn't there for the game because I had to.
No,
you know, yes, I've listened to the tape. I think there was some contextual comments at the end of it around how we, I guess, the resources that are there, you know, technical support, those sorts of things, and where we are. And what I think he missed saying was that right now New Zealand can't compete at those levels. He missed the right now. I think, and he was, my sense of what he was endeavouring to do was to shore up our defence, because his analytics had showed that we just leaked too many goals at those sort of pinnacle events and those tough games. And so he had a strategy there. I mean, that's his background. He was trying to get out and achieve it. And it was unfortunate, just in my view, that those comments were sort of taken out of context relative to where we are right now. You know, Japan's a pretty good team. Won the World Championships before. So, but they're unfortunate. You know, and I certainly, you know, expect the team to go out and to win, as you do. But
someone whose job it is to promote the game, though, he hasn't painted a rosy picture for young female players in this country, has he?
Yeah, I think they were unfortunate comments that were made.
Eric, if it comes out after the review that New Zealand football has ignored these issues, ignored player welfare issues, how does that reflect on the board and on the CEO?
Well, I'd let the review come out, and I guess that's the first thing. Second thing is that obviously our systems and processes actually haven't endeavoured to allow those information flows through. So there's clearly something wrong there. So I think we've obviously, if that was the case, then obviously things aren't working the way they should be working. Player welfare is really central to the game. I mean, players are critical. They're in high stress environments. We need to look after them. And as I said, the public have expectations around their sort of performance on and off the field. They're elite athletes. They're sort of, you know, the people that the younger players look to as role models in our society, and we need to do everything we can to support them achieving at those levels.
Andy, how's the hiring process coming along for a technical manager?
I've just put that on hold right now. So with this blowing up in the last week, I just stopped all of that straight away. We need to deal with the issue in hand, and then we'll reconsider what we're doing there right away.
And that job was created because the workload was getting too much?
No, I think one of the things I'd asked Andreas to do when he came into the football department was to look at the structure and to look at, there were some changes how we put a lot of our football business all together, which we hadn't been there before. So the way we looked after the junior framework and the youth framework and the coach development wasn't under the technical director's remit. So as we were changing that to put all football together, there needed to be a span breaker type role, which was, you know, somebody who would take direct reports away from the technical director. So that was in course for probably 4 or 5 months, and it's just unfortunate that's all come out at the same time.
Will plans continue for future Ferns games, given the World Cups next year while this review goes on?
Yeah, look, the show's got to go on. I think everybody's committed to making sure we deliver on what we've set out, and this is an unfortunate and really disappointing you know, event that's going to cause some issues, but we've got to deal with it, and we will.
Any further questions, guys? Thank you very much for attending.
Thanks. Good.